Are you tired of being frustrated because your students are lost in class? Then you are watching the perfect video. Our expert team will give you some tips to be the best teacher. Hi, would you know how to distinguish the three work sectors? The three-sector model in economics divides economies into three sectors of activity: extraction of raw materials, manufacturing, and services. So, to begin with, let's start with the first phase of all this clear process, which is activating. Activating involves getting the learner's brains working before introducing a topic or theme, as well as motivating them to learn in CLIL. It is important to activate both ideas and energy. These are the three important theories in activating: bilingualism, constructivism, that stress that learners are taught to build up knowledge for themselves, and social constructivism, which emphasizes that learning is a social process. It can increase students' motivation. It also helps them to create a context and expectations about what is to come. Moreover, it helps to focus because learners come into our lessons from other subjects and need to tune in again to a new. And learners are different, and activating makes these differences visual, which helps a lot. These are some activities you can do for activating in CLIL. The first activity we propose is a letter soup, the classic game in which students can play and learn at the same time. But in this case, our letter soup will contain different names of jobs from different sectors, and our students will have to look for them. Then they will have to classify those names in three sectors, but for that we will give them some drawings of different jobs and they will have. And for learning grammar, we will mix up the words of a sentence about the topic and ask learners to recreate the original.
Providing lesson input. About input, how can we work it? We know that we can use textbooks, videos, graphics, audios, or whatever we want. The best way to work input is providing appropriate input in English. So, we must give appropriate content in the appropriate level of English, and finally in the right cognitive level. That is so important. Something so important is finding the right cognitive level, because input at the right language level might not be challenging enough in terms of content. So, which is the best mode to work input? Oh, I know, I got it. Creating some activities. In the following activities, we are working the first sector and we will introduce the second one. In the first activity, we are going to use some pictures and we will ask our students some questions to work the first sector. So we are going to use pictures from the internet, and in those pictures there will appear jobs from the first sector, and the students will have to say what job is. For example, cattle raising or fishing in this one. In the second activity, to work the grammatical structure, pupils will use pictures from the previous activity and other ones with jobs from the second sector. After choosing one of the pictures from the first or the second sector, they will do a description of it using vocabulary, and the important thing is using the there are structure.
Now we are going to present giving understanding for CLIL. Processing of input consists of the learning in content and language. Processing of input have four main tools: organizing input, graphic organizer, multimodal, and made meaningful the class. Scaffolding is based on the idea of wood, burner, and rust. Builders use temporary scaffold to support a building. Once that can stand alone, the scaffolding is removed. It's a special kind of help that teachers can use to help learners move forward in their learning. Application in CLIL. Teachers need to provide learners with a great deal of understandable at the right level. Teachers may focus on specific details and design appropriate tasks for those. Looking at materials, teachers first need to select vocabulary items that learners need to know and understand in order to be able to process the input in a task or experiment. This is the target vocabulary or the keyword. In CLIL, these are often subject-specific terms of content. Vocabulary helps learners to understand it. Learners cannot usually grasp a word meaning and retain it when they first came across it. Learners must work with a new vocabulary to make connections with the network in their long-term memory and store the word. The setup of tasks is also an important factor in remembering vocabulary. The multi-feature hypothesis explains that the more mental action a task involves, the more likely are learners to retain knowledge, as Walfons says. Vocabulary will stick better through meaningful tasks related to the new vocabulary. One way of creating such a task is personalization. Learners do a task related to themselves. In personalizing tasks, learners have their own individual response, will help them recall and use the word in another context. Glossaries allow learners to record important vocabulary. This is often in the form of a notebook or a computer file containing terms for each subject. It is a list of words which learners need to learn and understand and use actively. To process and understand input, learners need reading strategies. This helps them become more independent learners that ultimately process input themselves in their own way. A good example is the task asked. The activity consists of 20 cards, 5 jobs of the primary sector with 5 cards written in the primary sector, and the same true with the secondary sector. The student must match a job and the sector that belong to. The second part will consist of graphic organizer. It's a manipulative way to understand and process the information they have learned before. They will make 2-3 maps, one of the primary sector and the jobs, and the other of the secondary sector and the respective jobs. The example that I choose is crossword, because after a number of lessons around a topic, choosing words about primary and secondary sector will be so useful for learners to retain and create the crossword.
Encouraging speaking and writing in CLIL. This chapter is about encouraging output. It means that we have to get learners to speak and write in the second language. We define output as the production of language and content in the target language. There are different types of output. output can be linguistic or non-linguistic, formal or informal, spoken or written, individual, pair, or group work. Why can we say that output is important in CLIL? Encouraging learners to produce spoken or writing outputs helps them to think through ideas, to express ideas, to share knowledge, to get feedback, review ideas, to adapt and refine ideas, and to negotiate solutions. We have to be aware that learners have two needs. Firstly, they need to be able to show what they know about the subject with or without language. Secondly, they need to be pushed to develop their language skills and use more complex language to express complex ideas. In the case of teaching and speaking, group and pair work offer effective opportunities to use language. By interacting and receiving feedback from others, learners will discover the appropriateness and correctness of their content and language. There are some effective speaking tasks. Create a safe environment, choose the topic carefully, plan and structure interaction well, and use a non-hand rule and give learners time to think. In the case of teaching writing, teachers played an important role in encouraging their learners to produce different types of writing output. Therefore, it is essential that they demonstrate knowledge and understanding of the writing process. Activities. In our writing activity, we will have to combine content and language. For this, a good idea will be the three-picture story. In this activity, we will have to look for three pictures of the topic. In this case, the second sector and the third sector. The students will have to write a story connecting the three pictures. We will give them some time to brainstorm about what they want to write, and we'll give them feedback to help them. In activity, we will encourage students to produce speaking output and learn and practice linguistic structures by Keep the Story activity. The teacher will start with a sentence story that is going to be related with the sectors. Then she will write it on the board. After the teacher, each student will keep reading the sentence written on the board and adding a new one that they think on. They will be helped by the teacher to produce the sentence properly, but after that, they will have to read it alone.
Assessment is the gathering of information about learners' progress, and this information will be helpful for teachers, parents, and learners. Assessment and feedback are central to all learning, but do you know why? Teacher assessment and feedback influence how learners learn. For example, the way CLIL teachers assess their learners and give them feedback on their achievements influences how learners learn during lessons and also during studying outside the classroom. CLIL teachers can use assessment and feedback to encourage learners to work on developing their understanding of the subject content. Feedback and assessment are also helpful tools for making learners pay attention to appropriate and accurate language use. Alignment means setting up classroom activities that help learners achieve the lesson aims. If the aims, activities, and assessments are aligned, the influence of the teacher on the learning, it will be great. Now, we can see two different types of assessment. Assessment of learning, which provides a summary of what a learner knows and measures and reports learners' progress to themselves, and assessment for learning, which is used in the classroom to raise learners' achievement rather than simply measure it. Some negative points of assessment for learning are that there will be students who dislike working in groups. It's time-consuming for the teacher and students can copy. But also we can see lower grades, lack of clarity, and distrust. And why we should assess language? First of all, because encourage them to pay attention to it, and then not only help to improve learners' language use. Some assessment techniques are rubrics, peer assessment, and self-assessment. The fact that a range of criteria can be incorporated into a rubric makes it a very useful tool for field teachers because it can make the assessment of subject and language more visible to everyone.
For this activity, we are going to use flashcards with correct and wrong sentences related to job and work. The ones that are wrong are the typical mistakes that our learners did. Each student should take one card, read it, and say if it is correct or not. If it is wrong, they will have to correct it. On this activity, we are going to split the class in small groups. Each group will create a story related with jobs, and after this, they are going to create a rubric. To finish, they will correct the story of other group using the rubric created before.
Finally, we are going to present how to work with projects. There are 4 types of projects: information and research, survey project. The third one is production project, and finally, performance and organizational projects. Information and research projects involve studying or comparing a particular aspect of a topic. For instance, learners carry out research into the effect of global warming, comparing 2 different countries. This type of projects, learners create surveys, questionnaires, or interview questions, and then gather information about people's opinions of a topic, in this case, work. With the production project is a practical way that learners create or design an authentic product. In the last type of project, our students create an experience for other students related with the topic. Working with projects leads to our students lots of benefits. For example, promotes motivation and creativity, learn to transfer information, develop different skills. There is also a skills integration, and there are authentic assessments. But also there are plenty benefits for teachers. For example, projects can be used for many years. Also, you get closer with your learners. You develop themselves as you as teacher, and you distinguish the different levels of our students. To sum up, to create the perfect project, you must take into account the 3 main points. It must be cross-curricular, so you have to decide common aims with other teachers, and you must take into account multiple intelligence of the students.